Yeah. It says the troop number on there, but I don't like.
So I don't
Because I thought it, because I know Nicole and her daughter, so I asked her if she knew. She said, I'm like, well, if I can do the blessing box to kind of match that.
okay, and I think our so.
I don't know. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I ordered something. Oh.
Made out of like that weird like plastic.
I'm looking for the.
So, yeah. I'm like, I'm so trying to like, but then like, sure. I've heard from others, so I don't think I don't know what's going to say that, but.
Yeah.
She decided that she wanted.
I don't think I think it's so. It's Olivia. So then she, so is that level 5?
So it was 200. Yeah, she's older. So. You still have to do like whatever snack or whatever transfers.
You know, she really likes music.
So these are like stuff for the classrooms that want a banana emoji. Like I didn't have to that. Yeah. So and then let's see yeah, like this is because we think videos. Especially with like an egg allergy.
Oh my gosh.
And maybe we should just want people to
Come through.
For sure. What about if we did like, yeah, and we yes. We didn't. Okay, whatever.
These are really spread out.
Well, I actually was like, I thought you guys were sitting up there.
No,
Curious to see.
I was waiting, who was gonna pick present, who was gonna pick, looking for my new board.
No, we're just here to share parking.
Well, folks, shall we get started? You know, again, as I mentioned, as I've been making the rounds, I'm not sure if I made all the schools yet or not, you know, with the referendum and just meeting with parent teacher organizations or associations. But I thought it would be really good. Part of the interest of the board and myself is to elevate the parents' voice. You know, we really want you to be involved. We want to make sure we open up multiple channels. You know, this is something we want our principals to be aware of and see this as another source of information for the school and to reinforce some of the things that we were doing. So I thought maybe to start, we'll just introduce ourselves, you know, and that we're coming together. And so why don't we go around and we'll just introduce, and then I'll have board members who are in attendance today, because again, I think this is demonstrating their support. They've adopted schools and wanting to really make sure that the parent voice gets elevated too. So why don't we go through and we'll let the board know who's here.
My name is Melissa Hippard. I'm the treasurer at Monroe. I have a son who is in 3rd grade at Monroe, and he is on the spectrum.
I'm Stacey Eck. I am on the PTO at Riverview, and I have 2 children there.
I'm Amy Russell. I have 2 children at Madison, where I'm the treasurer and the PTO, and I have another 3-year-old that'll eventually go there as well.
And Jim Powell, superintendent.
I'm Carrie Sweetman. I'm the current PTO president at Jackson, and I have 2 children that are there right now.
I'm Mara Lambrock. I am the treasurer at Jackson, and I have a 3rd grader there, and then 2 at Wilson.
And so we obviously have very interested board members attending in terms of wanting to see how well I do and getting this kicked off. Okay, so they're not really a judge; they're just really very much supporters. So why don't we?
Yeah, I'm Stacy Selder. I'm the current board president. I'm in my second year of a 3-year term. And my adopted schools are Row and our the one that's always single. I can think of a good one. McKinley, yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not standing up because I'm not going to tell us. All right, Stacey. So I'm Kathy Willis. Actually, Stacey, I think you and I are neighbors.
We are.
In my spot. And my schools are supposed to be, I've been terrible. No, listen to me, I can't do either. Jefferson, yeah, Jefferson, Riverview, and Franklin. Jackson. I brought things there. And that's I'm going to go to here. So anyway.
I'm Matthew Spalding. I actually have a 13-year-old at Washington, so that's my adopted school in Washington. A lot of time there, so this is my just finished the first full year, so get 2 more years in winter.
My name is Matthew Phipps. My adopted school is Franklin. I have 2 children. They're all under the age of 4. I have an oldest who's 4 right now. His name is Lucas. He is at the YMCA right now. And I'm excited to be here. Listen to you. My name is Tony West-Elica. I'm a board member. This is my first year on the board. Thank you all for being here and for volunteering on the PTOs. Thank you.
So again, what I wanted to do was elevate your voice, make sure we're connected, okay? And also, not only do I want to make sure you understand what we might be engaging principals and schools involved, from a district perspective, but it's also interesting for us to know in terms of what you're experiencing and what we can do to help your schools. I mean, minimally, what I want to do is whatever I can to increase your membership, to make your individual schools as strong as they can. But some of that is being informed, so that's the starting place. And so I put on an agenda there a little bit because these are kind of the big issues as I see them right now that we're involved in. And while some of this stuff I'm guessing has been shared, but to various levels, and you may or may not know, but I want to make sure that we're kind of, this enables us to also recognize how well we're doing, that the word's getting out, that we're kind of on the same page, we're working together. I would say I'm just delighted. It's an honor and a privilege to be here leading the school district. Coming in, one of my interests is, first of all, your size enables you to do things that others may not be able to do. Even though we're a low-funded school, the larger you have, the more potential you have. You have more to leverage. You could really create more opportunities. I think you're just in a wonderful area. When I was hired, 2 things that were identified as significant. One was raise the academic achievement levels, and 2 was student behavior, where we didn't feel like they were, where they needed to be, okay? So that we would want to be able to showcase our schools to anybody and anybody coming in any time and have them walk away with just an, well, you should go visit Manitowoc Public School District, just to be able to showcase. And so really, as I see it, it's really moving us back into what we used to be known for as the top tier school system. Okay, and with that, why be good if you can be great? I'm even saying, why not the top 5? I think that's how much potential we have. I would match our teachers to any school district in the state. But I have recognized, which many other schools are now recognizing, I just think we're out there a little bit more in the front, is we've disadvantaged our teachers and penalized our students with a curriculum that we have for reading. It's not that there isn't some good things, but that was loosely Calkins. It was a reading curriculum that isn't, strong in phonics, phonetic awareness, things that many of us, had the opportunity and privilege to be able to be schooled in ourselves. And so some of the things we did in terms of my coming on board, not only did the board hire me in an interim capacity, and that interim capacity was to tee this up for the next superintendent in the school district, not to waste any time, but to really have us on a pathway to take us back, in terms of where we all want to be. And in that capacity also, at the same time, they launched a strategic plan. And, so that initiative was going, so the same charge with me was with the strategic plan, engage our stakeholders. We want to make sure that we really truly understand what we're attempting to accomplish. We want to make sure all stakeholders had an opportunity to look into that. And so again, some of these things we'll highlight here a little bit just to see if you have any questions or whatever. So with that, obviously that led to some things in terms of improvements that we were already looking at. We are looking to pilot a couple schools on a new reading curriculum. It was really a little bit more of a whole school improvement model to the extent that nothing stands alone. And so while we might work on literacy, which we think is critical, if we're ignoring attendance or parent engagement or community engagement, if we aren't really paying attention to interventions, if we aren't paying attention to special education, those things could work against us succeeding. And so part of my recommendation to the board, which they initially adopted to move down the road, was to be able to have something that we could compare and contrast our own initiatives, which I felt really pretty good that we could be moving, to be able to, move us up to this top tier. But if we weren't, I knew that this model would also be able to enable us to see, oh yeah, I mean, we could be doing even more than what we're doing. Well, as many of you are now aware, that became a little bit question. Why should we do something, that all students are experiencing, for their parents? And in the educational circles, sometimes they would say that every student is deserved to be guaranteed a viable curriculum. Okay, and so really that then question about should we do something just as a pilot to that magnitude, or should we consider all? And one thing led to the next, and we sent teachers to sites, and the feedback started coming back to the extent this, they couldn't believe how these students were outperforming our students. So they, I think, came back with the recognition that we were underestimating what our students could do, and we were underestimating what we could do working with our students. So that's what brought that on here a little bit. Additionally, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, it's also a time with referendum. So not only are we have a strategic plan now, we're already doing an initiative to try to elevate student achievement and address behaviors, but we recognize you can't do anything if your schools aren't funded. And operating referendums is just a means of how schools balance their budget. And over 80% of our schools are doing that right now. So again, that's into the fold, and that's going on right now. That's why it's important to make sure our schools are all on board, kind of knowing where we're at with it. And we'll walk through that a little bit more. So that's, and I would also tell you that the board, and that's why they're sitting here right now, the board is also identifying, geez, improvement starts at the top. If we're expecting everybody else to raise the bar and to work to achieve that, what are we doing, to make us more productive, more effective? And so we're actually looking at the governance model. How do we keep the main thing, and the main thing being student achievement and success, and that we become kind of that beacon for others to follow, and that destination point where people want to be part of the school district. So what I've done here, and I would hope that you'd stop at any time and share, because this is really wanting to get as much, to make sure that you see where we're at, what to engage in. Are you familiar with everything I've mentioned so far? Okay. So maybe let's just kind of walk through. We went through some introductions here. So the strategic plan, and so I just pulled out some of these attachments. Were you able to open them up and access what was on there? On some of the links? Yeah. Okay, so I just pulled out some of the information because I'm really, it's coming back down to how can parents help? What's the parents' role in all this? And so I've tried to move us to an area that would help you understand, how you can even work with the principals and staff, because Somewhat Success for All is a model that engages parents. I mean, that was like, and we'll walk through that a little bit, but so what you have here on page 2 or the back side of the front, these were the 5 pillars that all the stakeholders, identified as important. And if you look on the left-hand column, and then on the right-hand column is really how are we going to measure this? And these are still in the works for refinements, but we're wanting to be able to post our progress along the way. so that all the community really can track to see how well we're doing. But if we go down, you can see then in terms of the first one is student success or academic achievement. That's really where that focus is. How do we keep the main thing so that that's where our focus becomes. The second one, student culture, you can easily relate that to behavior. You can see, so these are our priorities, and we're working to them in terms of then how do we prioritize our work. The third one is workforce engagement. We obviously feel very strongly about our staff, our teachers, and our all of our staff and administrators. How do we ensure that we retain them? How do we ensure that we can continue to attract the best and want them to not only stay but to live here, to send their own children and stuff like this. The next one is infrastructure and funding, and you can see we're already into a referendum. Critically important, to the extent that we're recognizing how important that is to our operations. And the last one is stakeholder relationships. How do we continue to make sure that we're connected? That we're involving parents, that we're involving, the whole community to the extent that these are community schools. And as I would say, strong schools build strong communities, and strong communities build strong schools. So I think it's critically important. Do these sound like some of the priorities this district should be involved in? Right? Would you see them all equally important?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's where we're working towards. Okay, but some of that starts with engaging you then, right? Otherwise, we're kind of doing our own thing and hoping people are coming along, and that's not what we want. What we want is this to be a team effort. So let's move then to another critical item, and that's moving then into the third page, and that's this referendum. Do you feel somewhat knowledgeable about the referendum? Questions? Do you know how devastating it will be if this doesn't pass?
Yeah.
I mean, this is, and sometimes people don't know this, that over 80% of schools in the state have to balance this, and it covers about 10 to 20% of their budget. Okay, and we're no different. Unfortunately, our referendum is expiring during the worst time that you could have it. We're going from low inflation to high inflation. Okay, there's a lot of issues out there. And so what happens now, this is going to be, potentially because when people are having a hard time with essentials at home, it's going to be hard here. And so one of the questions that I would have for you and anything that you might want to share, while we cannot spend money to promote a yes vote, we can only really spend our resources to educate people. One of my questions comes back to you is, what can you do? And mainly what comes to mind, I'm assuming that you've got the connections of all the parents in your school. Just encouraging them to go out to vote. I mean, that's something that simple could really be, significant, to do that. And I don't know if you've discussed, other things you can do, but it's really that important. I mean, we're talking about, again, let's put this in perspective. Okay, so right now with our referendum expiring, we're already short. Okay, so we're short going into next year of $5.2 million. So even with the referendum that we still have, we're that short. When that expires, we're up to $9.5 million. What you need to know is this didn't just happen. You can take this back. This probably was in existence 3 to 4 years back. What had happened was when COVID hit, and then the federal government stepped in to figure out how can they help. What they did was we got over $12 million spending the last amounts of this going into next year. That made it appear that we were just increasing our revenue. And really what it is $12 million of one-time money spread out over a 4-year period of time. So our problem really started 3 or 4 years ago. Compounding this was that the state decided to say, oh, they're getting money. We don't have to give them money. So now we're shortchanged in terms of what something would have increased our base right along. For 2 years, we had no increase. If they had given us $200 for each of the last 2 years, we'd have almost $2 million more. And unfortunately, the funding formula also has a ceiling in that. When they first put this into place years back, they were in raising that every year for an inflationary amount, which really made sense, right? Your expenditures are going up. We should increase our money, our revenues to you in similar fashion. But they didn't. And so while our per pupil student is approximately $1,400, 14,000. Okay. 14,000. I'm going through these numbers enough now. I start down. If they had given us inflationary increases, if they had continued that, we would approximately be $3,200 more on top of that. And so we would have, $16 million more. We wouldn't even be going out for a referendum, because we've been pretty frugal with our resources. Likewise, as I mentioned to you also, is that, just in terms of if we were even at the same funding level that some of our schools in our county receive, we would be from $7 million to $17 million more, and we wouldn't have a problem. So we are being penalized based on our zip code, but that's where it's at. But that's how important it is. And so when you start to thinking about really our problem is, when considering the referendum is expiring, that at the end of next year, we would be, for the most part, short $9.5 million after those resources go through. It would take, we'd have to cut 40 staff members to only make up 4.1 million. It's really not an option. I mean, we really have to pass this. And I'm feeling good in terms of feeling that people are starting to talk more favorably about it. There isn't a no campaign, but sometimes people can think, well, it's just going to pass. And then they don't go out and vote. And the worst thing we could have is that this referendum fails by 100 votes. I mean, so that's where, if there's anything that you can do mentally, encourage parents to go out and vote. I mean, that's just a very responsible thing. Students, would appreciate knowing that that's our democracy, in terms of going out and making sure that people are being responsible. So any questions there on the referendum? So I'm curious, where do you think, from what you understand with the public, in terms of where the public's at? Are you feeling positive about this? Don't know.
I haven't heard of anyone strongly saying no against it. Majority of conversation I've had or heard has been people understand that this is necessary for our community and our schools, and it's so regardless of their other thoughts and things going on, they know that this is really important short term and
right. Because many things are going on. We recognize there's been controversy out there.
But regardless of that, I've only heard positive things overall in terms of referendum voting.
And so we call for another public forum preceding the board meeting. So that's another opportunity. If anybody, who might want to attend, we're going to also see if the press might want to sit in and hear what they're hearing. I would say the last public forum, there was really some pretty deep questions, but my sense was there a lot of support because board members were answering questions. We were all kind of onto the same page. And I think we all recognize this is a revenue problem more than it is an expense issue.
Are those being well attended?
Not as much as we'd like. I mean, we had probably a dozen people. Tony, were you recalling?
Maybe a little more.
Maybe a little bit more. Again, we made some rounds. I've spoken at some service groups and stuff like that. I wrote some articles for the paper, to try to, help, get that word out.
Are they streamed online then? And do you know how many people are watching online versus
I don't know that, but that seems like something that I don't know. That's something. Now we've made some things. We did. There you can access. A walkthrough. The presentation.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how many people, and I will inquire about that in terms of to see whether or not we see what the following is.
Yeah, if I could, Jim, just ask something real quick. I think just what would be helpful too when you guys are talking to your fellow parents and friends in the community about the referendum. I think it really just comes down to an issue about fairness, right? When you look at that funding formula,
And what that's caused us to do in the last, 10 or 15 years, just having to go back and get these operating referendums. It's really put us at a huge disadvantage. And if that thing was just equitable to begin with, we'd have an extra $14 million a year or something like that, right, Jim?
Right.
So, I mean, this to me is really an issue where, the board's doing everything we can to address that legislatively, which is kind of an uphill battle. And we don't know how long or if that will ever get resolved legislatively. But the only other option we have is to go to the referendum. And we're hopeful that, we can rock the boat enough to make things happen at the legislative level, but we don't know how long it'll take. And in the meantime, our kids, our staff, our community needs this referendum just so the schools everyone can reach their potential. So we appreciate all your help in getting that message out.
And again, as Tony was just mentioning, on spring break here, I was going to go back to Michigan. I decided not to because 2 board members were committed to the Wisconsin School Board Association had this opportunity that they created to go to the Capitol. And so we set up and we met with our legislators as well as the leader of the assembly, Loss. I thought it was very productive. Again, there's no guarantees, but they recognize that, their names are on this too, to the extent. So I think what we're doing is opening the door to try to push those reforms as well as increasing funding, increasing the ceiling, so they go back so that we're not having to be needing to go out to our public to balance the budget. Okay, that somehow there's more of a guarantee that we're going to have a reasonable amount of funds, to fund our operations.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it was really good. Yeah, Matthew.
Did you touch on the low revenue ceiling? What happens then if it doesn't pass?
Well, the other thing that we found out, and many schools aren't aware of this, but we also found out that at some point in time when the legislators were trying to provide more money to schools, there was resistance. And so sometimes when there's resistance, they figure out, okay, what else do I have to do, to get support? And unfortunately, what they did was because they were trying to raise this up, but they haven't been taking care of it. So what they have identified now is if you go out for a referendum and you fail, you are not going to be able to get the additional money. So we're going to be penalized approximately $1 million in addition to the 5.2 million.
Right,
So
that's not including our referendum we're going
Yeah.
for. What they figured was if the community doesn't support a referendum, they're not going to give us that low end revenue ceiling assistance that we already count on.
Yeah.
So we'd be losing that extra amount of money that brings us up to about $10,000 for state assistance or no. So we would lose that on top of not obviously getting the referendum. So that would put us in a pickle if you would not believe.
even that much more. So I mean, that's
After speaking with Democratic and Republican leaders, it does sound like when it's all said and done, both sides do want to give a big chunk to education, right? Because I mean, they've been sitting on not giving us any bumps in per pupil on either side, whether it's lower revenue per pupil or regular per pupil. They've not given us anything in the last couple of years just because of all of the federal funding we've gotten through COVID and ESSER funds and things like that. So I think they recognize that they need to give us a good chunk, which is good. I mean, we can't give any answers for sure as to what it was going to be, but we're hopeful. I think what we did was good.
Yeah.
Going there and speaking for the Manitowoc Public School District.
Hey, Matt, go ahead, Kathy.
I just wanted to say this like as a positive note. So you guys know I've been on the board for 3 years. It's just funny to say that because it's like such a really little time, but yeah, like old school. But this is the first time that as a board we've like taken this on. Like for the previous 2.5 years, this is a new board. Like we're finally like going to the state and saying, being proactive and saying, look, we got to raise a ruckus because this is very unfair for our kids. So I think that's an exciting thing that like people on the board right now are seeing the importance of that. And that's actually like written into one of our job descriptors. Like if you look at WASB, which is the Wisconsin Association for School Board, you know, we're supposed to advocate for our school districts. That's, yeah, with legislation, and we've never done that before. So I think that's something new that's really exciting that we're trying to do. So it's cool that they're starting to hear our voices. And while you guys did that, the previous week, we actually got to spend here Senator Lemonhew and Representative Tillo. So I got to go do that, and actually I think 5 of us were there. So so we're finally getting our voices actually heard. So I just wanted
And
to know
that's
that
where I was going back before, when the board has committed themselves to, we're asking everybody to kind of raise the bar and pitch in, all decks on hand, and they're looking at themselves saying, what are we not doing that we need to do? And this is, I mean, I'm amazed about really how much, you know, people will have different views of this. And I think eventually everybody's going to see, you know, the positives that are going to, you know, come out of this. But part of that commitment is, you know, how do they keep the main thing so that we keep this focus, that we don't let this die. But the funding, you know, how do we also, you know, start lobbying and advocating for really fairness, you know, out of a system.
And when I know you're not naming names, but I'm going to. So for example, Reedsville, they get about 18,000 students.
Yep.
We're getting 14. Think about the percentage difference that is, and how much of an advantage their kids are getting per student than we are. Right? So that needs to even out. I can't think of a single reason why that should be happening.
So what's unfortunate right now, unless we create pressure, you know, and the pressure through leverage by getting more people like us, and it isn't like there aren't some advocacy groups out there. They just haven't really been able to influence legislation yet. In Michigan, something similar happened. I got very involved in that. But what was the trigger in Michigan when it started really almost collapsing on them was a school district of significant size closed their doors. And so we're not doing it anymore. You know, this is just as unfair. We're getting penalized because of where we're, you know, what our zip code is. You know, so it created an opportunity for them to redo the system, but the pressure wants to bring it back. Because, you know, unfortunately right now the legislators look at this as, if I tried to change the system, I'm gonna, you know, out of fairness, I'm gonna create winners and losers. And so we're gonna benefit the people at the bottom. They're gonna say, I'm gonna get so much pressure from the people at the top, you know, because we're gonna restrict their growth. Because they're gonna provide more for the bottom to try to close that gap. And I don't think everybody needs to be at the fair place, but what's reasonable? You know, 7 to 17 million just in our county isn't reasonable. So now resources obviously critically important. We talked about that. So let me ask you, why do you think literacy has become such a hot topic, and or why the need for us to look at a reading curriculum and what we're doing? You know, what's your sense from what you know with the school district, and how we fared? Do you know how we fared and what opened this all up? Why don't we share with a little bit in terms of, you know, because I'm curious because some people have suggested to me we're doing fine. And that's why I'm curious over what does that mean, you know, to our parents. You want to share anything?
Well, you know, overall through state testing, it's shown that we have a very low reading at grade level percentage in our school district. So obviously that triggered some concern, and, you know, knowing what the science of reading is, and now knowing more about the Lucy Calkins program, and understanding that really isn't a science-based reading program. You know, obviously it came to the point where something else needed to be implemented in order to benefit children.
And that essentially is it. You know, for the most part, you know, we are in the, you know, approximately in the area of 30% of our students are reading at grade level. That meant 70% are. And as some of my board members now, like Kathy, it's nice hearing this. She recognizes, you know, in terms of what we understand about teaching reading, is you learn to read through grade 3, and then you read to learn after that. So if you don't have those foundational skills, you are at risk. And there's a lot of parallel in terms of how many more students drop or don't even finish school because they aren't comprehending, they're feeling like they're losing, and our graduation rates aren't where they need to be. I mean, so you can see, so not only do we need to kind of raise this bar with good curriculum in terms of what our expectations to help, but we also have to figure out now how are we going to help kids who already passed grade 3? How are we going to close? What else can we do to advantage our kids, to try to help them get caught up? That is, again, one of the reasons for what the board actually ended up selecting was the Success for All. And let me tell you in terms of what we have all learned, because we could have learning differences of a 3 grade level span within a classroom. Can you imagine the challenge for a teacher? To be able, so what we do in the classroom is we'll take four students, maybe they're the lowest students or the next, but still, and we'll pull them apart. And while all the other kids are given assignment of silent reading. Now recognize when they're in silent reading, they're not engaged with the teacher, right? So essentially we're trusting that they're going to really get a good return out of whatever they're doing, while the teacher spends times with 4 students. Well, it's really a no-brainer, but what Success for All did was saying, but all these other kids aren't advancing in their reading themselves. No matter where you're at, you should continue to want to get a greater return. So they said, instead of just having 4 kids grouped together, let's take all those kids from all the various grades and put them together so that the teacher now has a whole classroom with all a similar ability level, all for the purpose of trying to get them to the next higher group. And that comes down to what you hear in 90-minute reading blocks. But some of the things, again, just to clarify, that doesn't mean you have 3rd graders going down there with 1st graders or 2nd graders. We're trying to match those because you could have multiple grades, and so those kids can be divided. And so we're careful because you could have gaps of 4 years of learning within in a particular grade level. So it doesn't mean that there aren't some challenges. But that's why reading itself was really critical, and particularly with the science of reading, phonics-based phonetic awareness. Okay, so that's really, really there. But I wanted to highlight, the Success for All model is for years, the research has been saying, how can we know so much and not yet accomplish this? Why aren't we just knocking out why are we losing on an international scale? Okay. And so they recognize that nothing stands alone. This comes back down to that whole school reform. And I think where we ended up with the board was the recognition that, we're really behind. And one of the things that Kathy was extremely involved with the board going from last year to this year in carrying on an ad hoc group with behavior. Okay, and what was doing was we had retired teachers coming out, we had existing teachers, a few administrators, it was mostly teachers. And they came together and they recognized we didn't even have a code of conduct. In terms of, having some agreed upon parameters in terms of what are we attempting to accomplish. But what we experienced when we went to roll that out, we did really well in some schools, but not all schools. And we recognize there's an awful lot of autonomy within our school system. And this again goes back to the Success for All. I kind of sensed that, but was only working to have a pilot of 1 elementary and 1 middle school to demonstrate, what happens when you put it all together. So that was, again, another piece of evidence in terms of why it was important for us to be able to identify what best practice is and to consistently work to implement that. So what you have here on this first sheet, which is page 5, it talks about we're going to engage your whole school. We're going to, in my practice is this, and I had the custodian involved in it. I had the, others involved in it because there's so much to do. Teachers are involved in the instructional side, but they're also instruction on some of the other sides. And you can see that chart right there. There's 2 main components in terms of what do you have to do for kids to succeed. The academics are, for the most part, all at the bottom. From kindergarten, just as you would traditionally expect, okay? But at the top, you can see that there's these various groups. And so they're recognizing you have to make sure that you're addressing attendance, you're engaging your parents. This is why we're doing this right now. we're doing this because we don't know that we've connected with you, that we aren't really all on the same page and working together for the betterment of our students in our schools in the school district. But what I highlighted here was this is a distributed leadership model. It suggests that you will accomplish more by making sure you have leadership spread out in your school more so than in central office. So really what we've been working to is how to empower our schools. How do we make sure that things are closer to the classroom in supporting, what's going on there? So this first page just identifies how important it is. And they would have quarterly meetings and on all those various groups. And some are meeting weekly, but quarterly they come together to say, okay, we set goals for this quarter. And every leadership team here would be reporting out, how did we do? And it's all about data. What's the data? Don't tell me we've got better attendance. What are we tracking? Academics, what are we tracking? So all these things become part of it. But what I wanted to highlight then, if you turn to page, and this is where your interests can start surfacing too, in terms of what you can do, because you can see how, and on that first one for that leadership team, it also suggests, having a parent representative. Okay, so it'd be good for you to review this. Our principals now will be conducting an upcoming professional development. They're going to be working to train their staff, on Success Raw. In terms of some of these, so right now we're already moving. This isn't a top down. This is a all hands on deck. And I'm saying that there's a significant role that parents can play if we empower you, with information in terms of how you might be able to help. How can you get other parents involved? And Success for All brings, one is they've been in schools and they understand the research. What are those things that you can do? They recognize how important it is if a kid goes home and reads to his parent, comes back, signed sheet that the parent has listened to their son read. Sometimes parents aren't there to have their kids read. They've had volunteers at school so the kids can reach that, so we're trying to increase their independent reading. I mean, those things are kind of built into this model. They don't take anything for granted. I mean, so the more I think you'll learn about this, I think the more you're going to find, boy, this could really make a difference, because this is going to engage us all. And we're going to all have a deeper understanding as we're moving through this. But you can then start seeing there's 5 of these solution teams, and there are some essentials that are absolutely necessary, but there's more to that. There's more training that goes beyond that, but there are some things that are critical. And one thing we know, if you have an academic problem, kids aren't going to learn if they're not in school. I mean, so the very starting place is attendance. And again, Success for All will say, you have an attendance problem. What's your data show? Is it just at one school? Is it at grade level? What are the reasons? So it's finding data. And then essentially it's an assessment. What's contributing to this? What's the root cause? And so Success for All takes all these various groups through that same model. How do we know we have a problem? We have a reading problem. Every grade, particular classroom, group of students. It doesn't just accept the fact that you say you have a problem. What's the data show you? Then how are we going to be able to track that in terms of what our strategies are for improving that? But you can see then in terms of some of those categories, so you're looking, I highlighted some of the things in there, but you have, then attention, then intervention. The intervention is saying, and this isn't just for reading, we're saying some kids still, something isn't happening here. And just to leave those kids there, or some teacher, no, they're going to say, it sets up a referral system. We feel this child is missing something. Maybe it's a social emotional thing. Maybe it's just academic, but something's not happening. So it's now bringing a team of people together to say, what's going on? What can we do to make a difference in this child's life, to have them improve? And so as you see this is some of the material, and this is taken out of a book that's got 400 pages in the manual. I'm just identifying some of the things here that starts highlighting what they're going to, our principals, our teachers, our staff are going to be engaged in, and parents. Because now a principal will be looking in terms of, okay, I don't have parents in my school. How am I going to get them in the school? And there's various things that people have done, through different sites, and they've kind of registered, here are things you could do. And sometimes we'll find that you're already doing it, all the better, right? I mean, because then it just gets integrated, but you're reporting out, you're kind of tracking this progress. It doesn't take anything for granted. It's really wanting to know you're setting goals. Okay, we've got an increase of parent engagement by 20%. Well, all of a sudden you're shooting for 30. What are we going to do now to take it to the next level? Same thing with academics and everything. So really what I wanted to do was to share with you a little bit there, in some of these areas, how parents can really play a critical role and assist. So maybe pause while I'm doing a lot of talking in terms of what are some of your thoughts, in terms of our moving down this road. This is we're going down this road, we're rolling it out. We're going to work now to have the best role that anybody could do in terms of implementing this. But that's why this is even important, that I'm already working to try to get parents involved to know, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. To the extent that this doesn't take care of special education students, couldn't be further from the truth. Doesn't take care of at-risk, couldn't be further from the truth. And I think you can start seeing this for yourself as you start reading through this material. In terms of how important they say about how we're engaging parents, how we're looking at kids. This kid needs an intervention. We need to help. There's a lot of research out, and I'm not sure if you've ever heard the term RTI, or response to intervention, but it essentially identifies sometimes when schools have really low achievement levels, they start staying as the kid. Okay, and what starts from what kid is the lowest performing in the school, and all of a sudden, and I'm not talking about the entire special education population. We clearly all can understand, some very visible handicaps that, where special services are needed and stuff like this. But, if you're not achieving, in the school district, okay, and we don't seem to find a way to help, geez, maybe they can help you in special education. And this has been longstanding in terms of that we don't sometimes know what to do, and it may be because we're not using the right curriculum, that's created some of our problems. We then say, well, geez, we'll just let the special education people with their expertise help. Well, typically the federal government has been concerned because, approximately 11 to 13% of a school's population is, has been identified as special needs. And the federal government for years have been saying it's too high. Many of these kids aren't being served in a general classroom where we're capable of serving them. Okay. Our teachers aren't prepared, or they may not be using the right curriculum, or we're not using the right interventions. Okay. That doesn't mean, that they need special education services though. Ours is up 16-17%. And we also have that low reading level. I mean, so you start thinking, okay, but it all comes back down to what are we doing for every child? And what we're saying, we need help. We need to make sure we've got a good roadmap in terms of what we're doing. I truly believe that we were working to bring people together, to build that roadmap. But why build a roadmap if there's one that already exists, that's evidence-based, that has material to help support, that says the critical part of the cost that you should be incurring is professional development. So a significant part of why we're paying more for this curriculum is in fact because there's a strong professional development component. We need to make sure administrators are trained, principals are trained, but it's engaging them too. And so they're monitoring this, throughout the year, looking in terms of, okay, how they're using data to inform instruction. So some thoughts there in terms of what you see, what your concerns, your fears, your excitement, anything, in terms of, again, I'm looking in terms of making sure that I understand, to the extent of what we need to do more of, to be able to bring us together. Yes.
I guess my concern is, since I have a kiddo that is in special ed, is I don't know if this is like thought about yet or not, but if everyone's getting reading at the same time, how are all those minutes being met for all the kids that are in special ed that may have reading minutes? Does that make sense to you?
Well, first of all, everybody's gonna be reading, we're working to, that they're reading that they're, where they're at. Okay, that's always important. When we identify a student who is identified in need of special education service, we call that an individual education plan. That's a legal requirement.
Yeah.
For us to meet that. So this model is no different than any other model, that whatever that instructional plan has, it has to ensure that we're able to meet that.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of it as, like personnel wise, like, do you have enough people hired to like fill all those minutes? Does it?
We believe we have enough people.
Okay.
Are they in the right roles, doing the right stuff? That's another question. I mean, it's really difficult because everybody's hanging on to every word that I say, or anything that we start talking about can easily get interpreted to, I just lost my job, or you tell me I don't have a job, and so we're going through, some of this that we have to be very careful, in terms of as we're going, but we're looking in terms of, as an example, we have done a lot to put warm bodies in school. Because in one part, we've got a behavior issue. Okay? So we put more warm bodies in schools, and sometimes we've even called them, one is a dean of students, specifically in part to turn behaviors around. So the first thing you have to ask yourself, okay, so we've got everybody's really, we're knocking out of the park behavior-wise, and we're not. So what's missing? So sometimes it may be, working differently than we're working right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be doing exactly the same thing. So we will be going through this, yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that, one thing that I've learned out through this whole process is, kind of what Jim said about it's legally mandated that we provide what is in that IEP. And so we have to provide that. There's no question. So if you have 10 minutes, 15, 20, an hour of extra reading, it doesn't matter what SFA says, it has to be provided. And so, for instance, we had a student that came into our district that had some very specific needs. We didn't have somebody that could offer that. We had to hire them. We had to hire somebody that had that specialty. So there is, and it's not that we would want to get around it, but your situation, the special ed situation is so unique in that we have to provide it no matter what. So there will be, and I think what Jim is saying is we have people in our buildings, but we may not need as much with our disciplinary changes. We may not need as many people there for discipline, which allows more people to be funneled to special ed. Yeah.
We believe a lot of behaviors start because of academic failure.
Right.
Kids do not want to be seen as not being able to do something. And so sometimes, that it isn't that we don't have issues. It isn't that there aren't other issues because of COVID and the like, and all this isolation and trying to bring people back. I mean, there are a lot of challenges, but I would look at this as a lot of opportunities. But the one thing we have to do is leverage our limited resources to the highest level possible. And what Success for All model is, it's a leverage model. It's really making sure you're getting good time. We identify all kids are not getting enough reading. We'll never get them caught up by doing the same thing. And that's where this 90-minute reading block comes out at their level so that they get a higher return. Just think of the kids who aren't in that small group in the classroom, in terms of what they might be losing, in terms of where they could be coming. So Success for All is built for the person who needs to come up because they're 2 grade levels behind, to the person who says, I can do more than this, and should be reading at the next grade level. So that's kind of what this model does.
Is that apply to like math? Or are they going to be the same?
They have a math component. We're not, so we're not adopting their math curriculum, but the same methodology is used in terms of how we work with, of kids. Okay. And so we don't have a separate block for math. They do. We're not going with that right now because we believe the math curriculum that we adopted, is good. in that the model itself will help us in terms of, for example, the model also says there's a lot of research behind this. I mean, so if you were looking at and doing research on cooperative learning, kids really learn a lot from each other. And what's happened traditionally, as you guys are all too young. When I look back, there was what we refer to now as the sage on the stage. The teacher did all the talking. The kids who didn't know what was going on were hiding to not to be called upon. Success for All doesn't allow that. All kids have to be engaged. And they work in small groups and they bring, kind of a little competition into this. And what we have is we'll have, groups of 4, and these students now their team will have an opportunity to score points because they're helping each other really problem solve and answer questions, to engage. And it really incentivizes. And learning really takes, now the teacher has a different role. The teacher can do a lot more assessment, okay, in terms of seeing. So the model has many different component parts, and that's why over time you're going to start recognizing. One of the things that they came back with when they visited both school sites, but particularly Steubenville, where they would have probably identified that they invented this because, they know the system inside and out. They don't need a manual. But one of the things that they came back was there's no student behavior issues. All these kids are engaged. And all these kids are using, all the research terminology that it was pretty impressive. And I couldn't have done anything more than to send teachers to come back and help spread that word. Again, we're just at the entry level on this. There's so much more. And it's really to launch us next year, but we're starting now. I found out that Wilson Middle School and this grouping that I indicated, they're doing it already. Washington. Washington recognized that, boy, did you see what how successful they were? And so they started doing this, and they've also built in a little bit of competition into this. And they're actually gaining, things are already changing because they're trying to implement things that they've already picked up. I mean, so, other thoughts, comments, concerns. I mean, I think the whole thing is really beneficial, but this was developed first of all for more kids that were at risk, but it will also work to elevate those at the top because that's the model it is, take them to the next highest level.
Oh, I have another question.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so do you reevaluate quarterly then as to whether that child stays in that group or moves?
Yep. Every and again, if you look at, on those solution teams, there's an intervention team. Remember, there's always even looking for more. What else needs to be done? Before even getting them into special education, if that were a requirement where they really saw that as something that we weren't doing, that child needs, extra help. A lot of that help is built in. So on some of these solution teams, they'll meet more often than quarterly, but what happens is quarterly, they recognize where all the students are at, okay, and their reading level, and it's all charted out. And then we have what referred to as a staff member, which is an SFA facilitator who is looking at the data, working to help coach teachers, but recognizing, okay, these kids are ready to move up. And so they're moved into the next highest reading group. Now, sometimes if somebody who is going the opposite way, there's a potential for the referral for an intervention. Something else needs to happen here. So they're paying attention to every kid, it's as the name says, success for all. It's just that they don't take anything for granted. They don't take parent involvement for granted. They don't take attendance for granted. They don't take, that we're doing the right stuff. What's the data say? Is every student achieving? And there's been pretty profound increases. But there's been failures. You know where the failures are at? People aren't engaged. And they'll just say it happens by itself. No, nothing happens by itself. Overused term sometimes is implementing something with fidelity. It was designed for success. That means that you will implement it as it was designed. But it's meant to sometimes you'll have teachers who will, you sometimes can, we just talked about the science of reading, right? So, there's a science and art of instruction. I would say, before you get to the art, you got to master the science. Then the art, you start talking about a master teacher whose toolbox is so full they can serve any student from a high end to an at-risk student and get, some phenomenal results. And so what Success Raw says, just as they do in terms of what does the research tell us that impacts student learning, then every teacher needs to be able to implement that. And so really what it does, so there's criticism, sometimes it's too scripted. Well, it's almost like teaching somebody to play a sport like basketball. If you don't tell the kid how to dribble or how to shoot and just expect that that's going to come naturally, then that student isn't going to play as well as they could do with the right coaching. So again, SFA is meant to both help staff and students, but to kind of take them from the science, to the art, to the extent that now a teacher flourishes because their toolbox is so equipped. So we're coming close, and I really haven't opened this up other than what I identified here is anything that you want to share as a starting place, and we'll meet monthly. And if this is okay, we'll do this time, every month we'll come in. But some of this is also in terms of what do I need to know from you? I've shared a little bit, just kind of an wanting you to meet the board. But this is my way of making sure that I am getting information from multiple sources, to know that things are working or there's some challenges. And I'd be open. There's been a lot of criticism of SFA, but there's been a lot of converts as we went to try to educate people and show them for themselves and come back and tell the story. That's the only way we're going to learn, is being open, transparent, putting these things on the table, working through what's wrong. The last couple of sheets in there are many things that we've done, already. And this is probably more than we've ever done about any other subject matter or any other initiative, in the school district. And we're just starting. I mean, in all honesty, I challenged the principals when I first came on board. My expectation, nobody said they couldn't do it, but I would tell you it's really more than a stretch goal. But I'm looking in terms of not this year's report card, which will come out next year as results, but next year's report card, when we do those assessments, I want to see every school come out with their school report card as being exceeds or significantly exceeds expectations. Now, does that mean that they're going to be reading at grade level? Probably not, because the gap is so big, but they're going to be marked so high on the growth that we're going to demonstrate we're moving faster than anybody else. And right now, if you're out and just Google searching science or reading and some other things, you'll see that this state is just now getting ready to wrap their arms around it. And a few districts have already, leaped out, before and done something on a particular pathway. This is pretty substantial what you're doing here. And in all honesty, I think you're going to have schools visiting us as we went to visit other schools, who are demonstrating this. But again, going back to anything for this first meeting, from your school perspective, that you want to share, that would be beneficial for me to know that I can take back to my team.
So I guess our biggest thing, and I don't want to do a whole woe is me at our school. We've had a hard couple of years besides COVID. We lost our PTO president, who passed away the year of COVID. We lost Mr. Simmons last year. So we had Miss Beatty come in, who's doing an amazing job, and we absolutely love her. And so we've got a lot of things going on with that. We also came into, until I joined the PTO, I guess I really didn't even know it was a thing, that Jackson is one of the only non-titled elementary schools. We're the only one out of all 6. So it's like when all the redistricting happened with all the 5K teachers, they split up all the 5K books and sent them, and we had to dip into our own pockets and pay for almost $2,000 worth of brand new books for our teachers because we're not a titled school. So there's money that gets spent at the other 5 schools through title funds that we don't necessarily get. So any improvements or teachers or anything, have any of that. So all of it has to come from our PTO. So we have to run ours differently because a lot of, we give teachers budgets every,
You're fundraising for
yeah, we're
Key
paying.
Essentials that you would see it, where others are getting.
So people see us bringing in, like this year we brought in $9,000 for the fun run. But they're not seeing that $3,500 every single year is paid out to the teachers for stuff that they need, so they don't have to dip into their pockets. So we're not even we're keeping half of that, and that goes to pay for our spring dance, and that pays for teacher lunches, and it pays for everything that we do around school. So it's not a poor us as a school thing. I think that's a very misconstrued way just to see it, just because we're the only school that doesn't get that. And I know it has nothing to do with the district, that's a state level thing. I'm just saying that it's hard for us to sit here and pay out this money on things that we don't
You're
think.
seeing almost
Yeah,
essential. Because
exactly.
others are.
It's like a new microphone for the gym. It's our gym floor is held together with tape right now.
Well, let me.
So it's just things
And
like
that's
that.
another one, again, we're just touching the surface here. The board has also recognized that for years, they've been looking for a long-range facilities plan, and they don't have it. This is another thing that's really critical. We need to get our facilities back in shape, in terms of where they're at, and it starts with a plan. You fail to plan, then plan to fail. I mean, so essentially we feel like we've neglected a number of areas, but this is really good feedback, in terms of what you're sharing, because these are things we can go back and discuss. How do we help all ships rise, right?
Mhm.
Just like with the referendum.
Yeah. Because I've noticed that too. Like I don't want to get into that, but it's like our school specifically has one reading specialist, and I was brought on as a para to help 4th and 5th graders. Well, it turned out reading needed to be more, so I was brought in with our reading specialist. Seeing what she does, and it's just one of her. She can only help a kid or a group of kids for 15 minutes before she's got to move on to the next group of kids because there's only one. But then hearing that other schools have 2 reading specialists plus a para to help them, it's insane because we have almost 400 kids at our school. So it's like we have a bigger student population, but there's only one of us and I guess that's a lot of where our concern is coming in at the school level is we've got one reading specialist. And then listening to how this will run, and they're concerned about how the one reading teacher is going to fit in. And then it's just.
And again, what we have like right now, we've, Jamie McCall wasn't able to be here tonight, and again, I brought some people in, or one person, and we restructured in some of this because we felt that there was an urgency here that wasn't being addressed. And I needed to have people who understood that we were capable of doing much more. Everybody means well. I mean, I've not had any problems with anybody I've engaged. It's just a matter of we getting the job done. And I would have to say we weren't. So there's some change. So this is valuable feedback, for me. And again, I'll keep working this back, to have this stuff shared and what we can do. I would also tell you that, because everything we talk about, we could get into talking about another issue. Another issue is how many students are choosing not to come here. That's growing. Why is that? When I first came, it was behavior. Maybe it's academics too. Maybe it's because we aren't taking care of facilities. I was at a PTA conference and 2 parents were showing me pictures that their children had sent about water kind of flooding the floor, not from the roof, but from the windows. I mean, that's just not good, and, it's having a plan and moving forward with some of this. And so we are about change. And I would have to tell you that I've had some pretty successful boards that I've worked with. This board is really empowering because they're action-oriented, results-oriented, and they're pushing that. And it's a challenge at the beginning, but if you start having everybody all hands on deck, it's amazing what you can accomplish. Yeah, it's going to be hard, and sometimes you have even a little setback. Other things that I want to do is I want to know in terms of how well are parents doing, how well are students doing, how well are staff doing relative to surveys? You know, we really need to have baseline data, you know, so that we're measuring, that we're connecting with you. And then that people are feeling empowered and part of the team, right? So did you have more? You said you had a few questions.
No, it's a person.
Well, that's really good. And I appreciate your speaking up because that's what we need to do. You know, we need to have our voices heard.
I guess it's not a hard thing about Jackson. I went to school at Jackson. The school is exactly the same as when I left it. So like the walls are still pink. We've still got tiles peeling on the back floor that kids keep kicking. We've got like the locker colors are different colors and like nothing matches in that school. Like it's just hard because like we still have a window busted out. So like that's the first thing people see walking into Jackson is plywood and a 2x4 because of what
First
happened.
impressions, right?
Exactly. And it's sad. And it's been that way since before Christmas break, something like that, the window. And so it's hard. And I know we do have a lot of behavior issues, but also I give a lot of props to Jill DeRocher, who's supposed to be going between us and Riverview, but doesn't because of everything going on in Jackson. But like I said, we've had a hard couple of years, and I think with COVID and everything else, I think.
But, you know, you kind of touch base on that uniformity, you know,
Yeah.
in terms of, right, you know, and that's again, what Success for All enables us to do. It puts us all in the same playbook with a means of being able to measure that, to see how we're doing so that we don't leave any school behind. Other comments or takeaways?
Well, I think this be
Yes.
used in the high school in any way. I mean, I know it's not.
It's up through the middle school, even though there are components of this that have been used where high school can buy, for example, their behavior plan. Because also getting along together as a component, character education is critically important. So while we're working our own, this Success Raw model has character education built into it too. And so sometimes that's been actually used and taken at the high school level. But right now it's only through middle school. You know, and so what we're doing now, there's a couple other things that are priorities for us. We have kids who are going through some of our partners, as well as our own instruction for preschool. Too many of them are coming in not ready. So we're not really, you know, we need to do a better job there. And so we're already met with our partners. You know, we changed a little bit in terms of one partner, you know, in terms of how to work, but we're going to also make sure we're doing a better job there. Because if those kids are coming not ready, we're going to have behavior issues. You know, it's going to start on, you know, early. So, you know, again, that's another area, you know, that we recognize are important. Kathy.
Yeah, I think like not having it be in the high school is a valid question, but I'm really hoping that because we're addressing pre-K through 8th grade, that over the years, those kids will establish like what good study habits are and have all of those things like really down so that by the time they hit high school, it's just natural. And if they've been engaged.
Learn more about, because I wanted it in high school.
Like right now.
Right.
Right.
So
I
just
get
if
that.
there's anything that can be, I know
Yeah.
there's a lot of issues there.
Yeah,
Any of this that could be, just the knowledge in general.
it's not a quick fix though.
Did you say that there's a lot of issues there at Lincoln?
Oh, so yeah, I mean, I know there's always a lot of behavior.
I will say though, at Lincoln, from what I understand from finding like the behavior group and stuff, that the principals up there are doing a really great job and they seem to have a real handle on things. Are there issues? Yeah, of course. So like one would be phones, right? They use a whole phone policy and yet it's not always being adhered to, right? Those kinds of things. But you know, behaviors happen not just randomly, they happen over time. So it's also going to take time to like, you know, kind of rein some of that back again too. And for our students to understand what the rules are and for our teachers to know what the rules are too. You know, it's real easy for one teacher to be like, yeah, you can have your phones out, which is great if they're using it for an educational purpose. But then if they go to the next classroom, the teacher does not use phones, how do you combat that then? Like, well, I got to have it in Mrs. So-and-so's room. And so, you know, I think it's going to take some time to like reestablish what those rules and boundaries are. So I do feel as though they have a pretty good handle on it. I think they're really working towards it. Lincoln is always at our meetings for the behavior group. Since we brought in people, like in May, because January through May, it was just like our core group of like, retired teachers and parents and that kind of thing. But once May hit, we asked teachers to start getting involved and administrators, and Lincoln has always had a really great presence there. And Anna too, by the way, is one of them who has always made sure she's there. And Jill now has joined our group also. So, and just because I have, oh, sorry.
No,
I get when I get,
I'm gonna raise my hand.
when I get going, I know, but I just want to say thank you for the thank you. You guys, like I brought stuff to you for that book night that you had. And you guys, you know, I haven't been very present in the schools with the ones that I've adopted, but I've tried to do things for the schools. I've just had stuff going on. And I want to thank you for the thank you, because you're the only school that's done that. It's really nice and heartfelt.
We try to stay on top
I
of
really
it.
appreciate that. You guys did a great job, so thank you for that.
Stacy?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, one of the things that the board has identified is that, we lack systems and communication. And so Lincoln is a huge part of our system that, so I think it looks like right now, like we're putting them on the back burner. But we know there are things academically and things that need to change there as well. So it's on the radar, for sure, because it just fits into everything else. So, we may not be doing a lot of talking about it right now, but we do a lot of thinking about it and how we're going to, you know, make successful changes there as well.
One of the things I think is very important is to elevate the parent's voice for higher expectations. I mean, you need to know what we're capable of doing and expect that. You couldn't do anything better for me than to expect that. Expect more from all of us. Because we'll rise as students will to what's expected. You know, and I would strongly encourage, you know, you do this. Again, I feel so empowered coming into this district, and I was delighted for the opportunity, you know, to be considered and be appointed, you know, for a permanent, because there's a lot of support for a superintendent. And I would have to tell you, there are a lot of things in the school system that would suggest we're doing okay. I mean, I've even had people publicly talk, we don't have a problem. You know, we're leading all the states, unless you read the rest of the article. You know, and the rest of the article says, and as we were just down attending the School Board Association's opens up, what are their opening statements? Wisconsin has a reading crisis. We're doing something about it. You know, I think though, again, we need to expect more. You know, it's really difficult because people, you know, change can be scary, and you don't want to change just for change's sake. You know, it has to be, you know, something that really will elevate you. But you know, a lot of that is leverage, you know, and I think, you know, the parents' voice, you know, expecting more. I mean, why are parents not choosing us? We can bring that back. But again, you know, first impressions, walking in and seeing things that turn you off, or behaviors, or low academics. I mean, we can change that though. Matthew.
Yeah, I just want to highlight the parent engagement and the contact I've been getting with parents contacting me. The aspect that we've been lacking is homework. Now, I know it might not be in every single school, but parents are being very inadvertently disconnected from their child's education. And we don't want that. That's why we're here trying to talk right now, because we want the parents to be more engaged with Success for All being the hub or the system that we can engage our parents and our students and our teachers together. So the big component is homework. And it's not too old fashioned to say that homework is bad, because that's kind of what the trend has been, that I've been hearing parents say, well, my son or daughter has been in the district for this many years and they haven't had homework in 2 or 3 years. And then the parent says to me, well, how am I supposed to, where am I getting this introduction? And I thank everybody for being here tonight, but the rest of the parents are like, where's my engagement, or how can I help my student achieve the reading that they want them to have, or they don't know where they're at. And a lot of it was eye-opening to some parents where they said, well, my student is just trying to sight read and then they don't put together, that's more of the science of reading, but parents through this experience in the last few years have been awakened to see the disconnect that with what's been taught to the students at school and then how they are trying to help them at home. It's been like ripped apart. And we're trying to say, hey, let's get that relationship back involved. Let's bring the parent, the teacher, and the student together by having homework. So that's why it's a simple old fashioned thing of having homework. But as parents, we need to have that bridge to our students at school and our teachers, not just through text message or dojo or Facebook or pictures or good times, actual homework, so that we know where the student is lacking or is achieving great things. So I just want to highlight that I've been getting concerns about homework. And actually children being pulled out of it because they haven't had any homework.
So I have a kindergartner and it's very interesting how she's being taught to read. I homeschooled my daughter first grade, my oldest in first grade during the weirdest COVID year ever. So the curriculum I chose for reading was all phonics based. So through that experience, I learned quite a bit about phonics and taught myself a lot about phonics. So it's very interesting that my kindergartner this year, and I taught her phonics. So that was something I chose to do on my own, but she brings home just sight words, which are good, but it's also just memorization.
Yes.
And then they also are bringing home level books and, with a sheet that you're supposed to indicate like where she's at in terms of like reading. Was it easy? Was it hard? Was it just right? And kind of a little blurb. And I'm in the schools every week. So I kind of ask her teacher and there's very low compliance from teacher or parents on that. I mean, I do it with her because she really likes to read and I know how important that is. But we've also done the phonics. So she's reading at probably a first up to a second grade level at this point, just because she understands how letter sounds are.
Right.
So parent engagement is going to be a huge issue regardless of how the homework comes back. And I know my third grader also does like a reading log and needs parents to sign it. And I think there were 2 kids in her class who did it every week. Otherwise, parents just weren't signing it, weren't sending it back. So I don't know how that changes. I understand people are extremely busy and there's a lot of dynamics with work and scheduling.
Well, and my
all of
understanding
that,
about SFA, Stacey, about, you look at that component, there's somebody a team
Right.
that is specifically,
What's
that's
the
all
data?
they do. That is their job.
Sure.
That's
to
their
engage.
one improvement committee is
And,
looking at.
so that, and I can't remember what school it was from, but what they did with parents that weren't engaged, that they just couldn't, no matter how much they tried, they set up, come to me 15 minutes before school,
Yeah.
read to me, I will sign your sheet for sure.
Right.
So I think that'll be the difference is we ask our teachers to do that now and it's exhausting.
Sure.
They don't have time to do it. They want to do it. They want to be engaged, but you can imagine, no one's calling me back. And so to have somebody on the team that's just doing that and being able to take the time to understand why the parent can't be engaged and come up with something about how to get them engaged, I think that's what's going to be different.
And what else is really exciting, I'm really blown away with how far this is advanced because I wasn't expecting this. I was thinking about how to start helping people understand they can do more. And that was with the 2 pilots. Now we're going to have everybody on the same page. We got 8 schools who are going to be working to uniformly implement this. You recognize what the return on that is? You're going to, we have some schools already leading the way. They're already modeling some of the stuff that they've already seen, getting a return. And their, Success for All has also mapped this out in terms of this is your first priority. Okay. Get 70% of your teachers at this level, and so they meet with us quarterly and we'll be doing our own scorecard. How are we doing? So it doesn't take anything for granted. And now, again, that still means that leadership starts from the top. But I just have to acknowledge our board. That's the only board that I've known since I've been here. But I've never felt really capable of taking on so much of the right stuff. That's why I'm meeting here, because they're just encouraging more of this stuff, and But that's where your voices are important, you know, I mean, elevating the bar, you know, but it's also the can-do attitude. And we can all kind of contribute towards that. You know, they have that winning team.
One of the things I'm gonna say is, we're sitting here, I just think this is such an opportunity to bring the PTO people together, because you guys are the people who are volunteering in the schools.
Yeah.
And there really isn't that much of that anymore. You know, I mean, for example, we have 2 schools that aren't even present here today, and you guys have 2 people, but, you know, back in the day when my kids were in school, we had a really strong PTO. But we've kind of gotten away from volunteerism in our schools. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but I've seen that disintegrate over the years. And it kind of goes back to what Matthew was talking about, even with homework, right? Like, it's parent engagement through, and maybe part of that solution in getting people volunteering again is the fact that they need to be connected through things like homework so that they feel involved in our schools. But part of why I'm excited is because, first of all, it brings all of you guys together, and hopefully that you can connect more and find out what each other is doing. But I see that as part of the role of PTO is like, you guys reach out to try to find people who are willing to volunteer and do more in your schools. And I only say that because I was one of the PTO moms. You know, I was one of the people who like passed out lunches way back in the day before we even had Chartwells, you know, that kind of stuff. It actually was a blast. That's how I didn't have a lot of my friends now. But I just think that coming together is really exciting, and I hope you guys see it that same way. Because I think that you know how what's that saying about like two minds are greater than one kind of thing, right? So to me, that's what this is right now. Is like you guys are
The whole is greater than the
becoming
sum of
more
its parts.
powerful because you're together. And I see that for excitement for our district too. That's okay. It's all about that unity, that we're all doing the same things in all of our schools, and kids who travel from schools to schools, who maybe go from Jackson to Riverview, you know, that they will go from the same program to the same program and be able to just like be absorbed right into that right away. I think that's one of the exciting possibilities too. So
Here's another thing I want you to think about and walk away with. We are here because we followed people. We're here with these low results because we followed people. It's time that we lead the way, you know, and I think we have that potential. You know, to take charge, you know, the best way to create the future is to create it.
Jim, if somebody wants to put something on agenda, you know, because I mean, I look at this as, you know, this is a meeting.
Right.
You guys are the focus,
Right.
right? And so how would one of the leaders of the PTO put something on the agenda?
Yeah,
When should they get that?
Yeah,
to
I
you?
think
How would
right
that
to
work?
me, you know, right now I'm kind of the hub, you know, in terms of, and the other thing, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, I was going to have both the special ed parents, because I'm also, I feel like the special education voice isn't heard enough. And as I've engaged, you know, people in the special education, you know, community, they're going outside to find more information. You know, that's a problem. You know, we should be, you know, the first place that potentially people can get the information they need, particularly such as, you know, we had one of our sons was speech and hearing impaired. You know, he graduated from top of his class, and it's just, but we almost missed that. You know, we almost missed not recognizing what we could do with some assistance. You know, so next Monday is going to be our kickoff, you know, for special ed parents, you know, same type of a thing, representative from each school. You know, I was going to,
Did
yes,
you send the email on?
I haven't yet. I will. I already have that same,
Oh, okay.
low different, you know,
Like, I don't think I got it.
no, you know, so I have that ready too. And I, you know, it was, yeah, it's, you know, because the referendum and everything else, I can't do this, you know, fast enough. But it's exciting because I'm really building capacity. Everything you do just helps me help lead, because we raise the expectations. Tony.
Thanks. I was just going to add on to what you were saying earlier, Jim. You know, looking at the state proficiency rate with reading, it's not much better than where we're at. I think we're right around 30%, and the state's at about 39%. And now keep in mind that apparently 39% reading proficiency is good enough to get us in the top 10% or the top 10 of the country.
Yeah,
right?
that's
So when you look at all the states out there. So I think we have a real opportunity here with this board, this district, with our staff, and with engaged parents like you guys to really, you know, change course here and really, I think, set the standard for our state. So I'm really excited about the direction we're headed, and I'm really glad that we have such engaged parents that are willing to volunteer in organizations like the PTOs. So thank you for coming out and for joining us in our mission to really, make this a destination district and get all of our kids reading. I fully expect, I don't speak for the board, but within a few years, I think that we can be crushing state averages.
Yeah.
And, I'm just super excited for what we're doing.
So I'd be good when you can be great, so I'm kind of changing from top tier to top 5 by 2025. So, I like reaching high, I guess.
I mean, when we have our individual meetings at our schools, are we supposed to be asking if there's action? I mean, I don't know what you want brought here.
Well, I would, this is our meeting.
Because really,
okay?
in our meeting, we're talking about fundraising,
Yeah.
what we can do, and like
I would
supporting
be
teachers.
looking more at, their issues there, I've already picked up on some, you shared, so feel free, you want to put something on the agenda, just give me a call and I'll put it on there. I'll really kind of create more time. I wanted to kind of give you background in terms of where are we from where I came, and then if you stop to think about it, a strategic plan, this SFA initiative, taking on the ad hoc behavior, preschool, recognizing that we're not doing enough there, where we're not, again, we're taking some things for granted. If we say it, it must happen, right? Things don't just happen. You have to be deliberate about it.
Stacey, I probably would just put an agenda item on there. Is there anything you want me to bring?
Okay.
Yeah.
Or even if, I don't know if there's a network of email that goes out to parents, if there's anything that's going on.
Not directly from the PTO, it would only come from the school itself.
Because when I go into, a school like Monroe and I'm asking the principal, what should I be advocating for?
Sure.
What's going on? That's really what we want to know is how do we get rid of these gaps?
Mm-hmm.
So no, you don't have to spend your whole time talking about that, but
Sure.
anything that comes up, you hear whispers about something, just so we can.
Yeah, it does. The more top we are at, I had to dispel some of the things because they're getting reported out like success rate is archaic and old. It couldn't be further from the truth. And last time at the last board meeting, I brought an article, 2 articles, because one, everybody said we're better than all the other states. And then I brought an article from the University of Wisconsin-Madison that said we're in a crisis, and what we're doing about it. The second thing was New York Times journalist who tracks education every year. He identifies a source and tees it up to help fundraise for that organization because they're really providing such a great return. And who did they select? SFA. And within this a month's period of time, they raised $1 million. Just because people are helping spread that word. Well, I kept you a lot more than a half an hour. Did you have something else?
Well, I guess these community events will be good because I know, like even I was talking to teachers at Wilson and they still don't understand how.
I would have to tell you, we've got some change. The Wilson principal is leaving. Okay. So we could have some voice if many things can contribute. Okay. An active voice really helps. A proponent really helps because all of a sudden credibility helps, because it starts, that's why sending teachers out. They've become our best advocates. Some of these that are being sponsored are because those teachers are putting it on. They're coming in together because they're excited about what this potential is. Wilson is an area that I have to work on because I don't feel that we've connected there as much as we need to.
There's definitely still a lot of talking and rumors about what.
I'm getting questions right now. When Success for All originally was launched, because they recognize how important buy-in is. So buy-in to do the right thing, okay? So if you don't buy in, don't do the right thing. So they don't do that anymore, but at one point in time, they used to have 78% they would want the vote of their faculty because they didn't want to throw money away. They didn't want somebody buying their product and then not have them implement it. Doesn't mean that it wasn't the right stuff, but they were. So I've got somebody from, Wilson right now who is raising the issue, even following up with that, asking about this, in some ways kind of suggesting, but we haven't bought into this. So I still have a lot of work to do, an awful lot of work. And I don't want to assume, that I know why where people are at and why they're there. I only need to know as much as I can to help educate and get other people engaged, you know, so that again, we feel very comfortable sharing and putting things on the table. Couldn't answer anything more. But you know, see, that's really good feedback because you're confirming what I'm suspecting. You know, we're trying to understand ourselves where we're at. Anything else? I kept you over. I apologize for that. Or you kept me
Feel
over.
free to cut him off at any time.
Yeah, I could just text him and say, I'll be back on.
I was just curious about participation wise, like how much participation do you have in
Not
your
good by
PTOs?
me.
And I know you guys do like a pizza night where you invite like everybody, right? And is that well attended or do you get like
Well,
extra families to come?
Are you talking about our monthly meetings?
I don't, I have no idea.
I'm
Yeah,
curious
yeah,
about
your
the
monthly
monthly
meetings.
meetings.
We have
For
like,
what? 'Cause you're the only
The
one.
System.
monthly meetings, it's just the board members all the time.
And
usually
how
about
many people is
60
that?
of us.
4.
But we have like 30 to 40 in the beginning of the year saying, yeah, we're so interested, and then like never respond to an email again.
Yeah.
But see, that's why Remember Solutions has parent involvement because they recognize that's quite often the
Yeah,
problem.
they always sign up like at back to school night, like, oh yeah, let me know, I'll be involved, and then it's just the 6 or 8 of us who do everything.
But it, you know, it takes leadership, school leadership too, you know, to help bring this about. That's why, I mean, that was one of the things I opened up with, you know, what can I do to help you with your, you know, even though Success for All is geared at that. But the board and myself, I want to make sure we're doing everything possible to try to promote that level of engagement.
As far as Washington, do we have members in Washington?
At the middle schools, we don't have the PTO, you know, unfortunately, when you start moving out of the grade school, parents become less and less engaged, you know, sometimes. That doesn't mean that there aren't avenues there that we'll want to tap into.
Right. I'm saying because
but
it's something that I can help start up when we
Yeah.
get, you know, going with Washington as well.
Yep. No, I think it's important, you know, that we find ways to have advisory committees or something that engages our community. I think opening up our schools again.
Another thing actually just came to my mind too. This is really stretching you guys. Yeah, right, that's true. I was just thinking about how Jefferson and Franklin are here and they don't really have PTOs. So maybe there's a way that you guys can help their schools get started. Not saying that you have to lead it, but I mean, I don't know how did you guys get involved in PTO? Or is it just because you already have a strong PTO and then it just kind of kept rolling? But wait, they're down to no one. So
Ours almost folded.
I think there's
Ours is close.
Yeah,
yours is close to folding too.
Yeah. we were close.
We have 2 people leaving next year, so we need 2 more
We do
board
too.
members, so.
which one of
Yeah.
us has those schools? I'm just saying
I
that Washington, I did not know that. So now I plan on going to Lance Masters and getting together with him and trying to figure out a way that we can start that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I have
To get that
Jefferson,
involvement.
and I know Courtney has put it on the principal that's put it on like in their newsletters and stuff. But
Right.
I mean, you guys have that plate too, though. It's, you know, we're seeing it as a non-parent involvement. I see that with PTOs too. So that's one of the key factors here is getting our parents back. I don't know how that happened though, how it was that volunteerism fell by the wayside. It wasn't really
I
encouraged.
think
for a
that's
long
just in
time.
general for everything.
I know, right? Right.
Yeah, you look
Like,
at,
it's just
you look
totally
at, you
different
look
than
at
when I was
social
younger.
groups now, people joining, you know, the Rotaries, and I mean, it's just
Yep.
everything. You have a group of people that think of all the nonprofits in town, how hard it is to get people
Right.
on a board.
That's true. That's true.
Something's shifted in our
Facebook.
culture.
I think I did too.
I can say at least from
Yeah.
our school that as soon as Anna came on, she's been a very big champion of our PTO. So she's been at our PTO meetings. She brings me into her office and asks me, okay, what can we do to get more parents to show up at meetings? She put
Which
out
is great.
a parent survey on her own. What days work better for you? Because we were always holding on the same day. But out of 378 kids we have at Jackson, we've got 30 responses back on the survey. We tailored our dates and our times to coordinate what came back on that survey, and we had no people show up. So it's like, and we don't have parents who, we have 2 open seats next year. We have people that don't want to join. We can't get parents to show up at meetings. Our school has a mass email where we do email out to all the parents that are on our mailing list. But we'll get the same thing. We'll come in and help out. And then when we reach out to them, we get nothing. So fun run we had, it was basically just the board members that were able to get off that day to show up. And that was it. So, I mean, a lot of what we're running is at bare minimum.
Well, we need to all come together as a group and see how we're gonna get our.
It's a starting place right here, right?
I mean, how do we expect our kids to be engaged in the classroom if our parents aren't engaged either?
Right, so any way we can help to, feel free to reach out to us and we'll have Stacy do it.
Stacy's finally having rough with the pancakes.
Oh, I took pancakes.
Here's just a quick thought, with those as you were saying, one of the things that you guys could do, like when we had the events, because your kids are engaged, maybe that's when you hold the meeting.
So that Anna actually brought that up at one of, I think, our May meetings. She said that she's going to, it was the April meeting, because she's going to have teachers come talk about our zones or regulations with parents, and we're getting volunteers from the middle school to come watch kids. Because it happens we're holding our meeting right before the orchestra concert. So she has been a champion of us in any way she can try to figure out how to get more people in. Or she talked about, we have our spring festival coming up. She said, if you show up to a PTO meeting, you get a free arm's length of tickets for Spring Fest. We had one parent show up when I was during, and she comes to all our meetings. So I mean, we even offering up incentives, yeah.
Sounds like a hard path.
It is.
We'll take it on.
One more of these might bring it into light. One of these meetings, one of the meetings.
I just think if parents were more involved, they'd have a better understanding of what went on in the schools.
Yeah.
I mean, since I volunteered more, it's eye-opening what's really happening in the schools. Good, more good than bad, but just like it kind of like lays it all out there. And then even just being in the PTO, like you know, Heidi, our principal, is always there. We always have a few teacher representatives. And so it really, you talk about what's all going on, like what our teacher needs, what our principal needs, like what, you know, like what can we do to help? Yeah, I don't know. So I feel like for the people who are complaining about everything going on, but they're not showing up to anything, that's just really frustrating to me and for you guys and the teachers and the principals. I mean,
that was why it was important for me to share, you know, that there's more of a success for all than just even illiteracy. You know, it talks about how important, you know, if you just read that one section on the family, you know, everybody wants that, but that's not easy to do unless you really take it on. You're very deliberate about this. Well, thank you so very much. You know, so next time, you know, I'll try to get something out there and see, you know, besides what I might, you know, fill for an agenda that you might want to. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Is this beneficial?
Yep.
Thank you.